What up, guys? The corona has kind of taken us out the whole racing scene for a while, so I am taking the time to make a cross-country video for those pilots that are wanting to get into Icarus style flying. I've been getting a lot of mails from guys asking, could we put an advanced course together to show the guys the ropes on what it's like to fly really long distances, how to plan for it, how to design your gear, what to look out for, all these kinds of things. And so from our side, this is pretty much all we do here at the Nirvana Racing Team XC side of us. We keep on chiseling on design. We keep on trying to make machines better as an offering for guys that are going to do this type of flying. But really, I would say the top tier manufacturers in the world right now, they are all spending a lot of time and money to give their clients the best kind of design to be successful in long range lifestyle flying or even racing. So this video really isn't about any manufacturer specifically, but it kind of gives you an idea how to plan for a race, because those numbers are important. You need to know your equipment in order to be successful, because you could have a horrible experience if you did the calculations wrong. All right, so let's start. I've taken the time to just to summarize the points that you need to look out for. All right, so first off, information. Information is key on knowing where you're flying. So you've got to have a really great nav system that you can display in front of you, whatever we usually call like a cockpit. It's either your reserve chute or your stowage pod or whatever. Even you can use a bag to put your clothes and fuel and everything else in. You've got to have a really great navigation system. And something that I use is the Air Navigation Pro app running off my iPhone. And you could use that on an Android system, not a problem. You download the maps where you're going to fly, and you can plan your routes, and you can be accurate where you're flying into, what airspaces you're flying into, etc. But more importantly, there are other apps like Windy, for example, and also other resources like having the telephone numbers of the weather service that the airlines use. They give you great information about what the wind speeds and cloud formations are at different altitudes. Sometimes you have zero wind on the ground, but you might have a tailwind at 3,000-4,000 feet up, and that might be a really great decision to make, whether you want to have that little extra help, because it could make a difference in your race planning. All right, so information is key. If you've got a great display, an iPhone, you can make calls. You could, not just an iPhone, but have access to those apps. And if those apps could give you information to select an altitude or where you're flying to as well, is going to make life so much easier. All right, aerodynamics. Aerodynamics is really important, because the more drag you have, the harder the engine has to work to get you from A to B. And if the engine works harder, you burn more fuel, and it becomes a counterproductive exercise. So you might have a really big engine, but if you've placed your bags in all the wrong places and you've closed up the front, the thrust line by putting bags like I did in the first Icarus. I put these huge cookie jars in the front of the machine, and it closed up the thrust line. I wasn't really thinking about thrust, and I wasn't really thinking about the airflow and the aerodynamics, etc. I was thinking, I did realize at the time that having a bag that was going to flap, a lot of pilots just get a normal clothing bag and they stuff everything in and they hang it in front of them. A bag that flaps, or a bag that's bulky and it changes the airflow, you've got to consider those things. If I have bags on the side here, it stops the airflow from getting to the engine, and it influences the cooling. Now, some engines have their cylinders at different places, some are higher up, and all of that has got to do with cooling down the engine, making it more reliable. So if you are going to design your gear, make sure that it doesn't obstruct airflow to your cylinder and influence your temperature. So I've got temperature gauges on my machine. I take good care of that, but also all of the other designs, the stowage pods and everything else that I use, that is aerodynamically designed, so the airflow is still very much the same as what the manufacturer had in mind when they designed it the way they did. So aerodynamics are important. It will influence your temperatures, engine temperatures, and it will influence the hard your engine works and your fuel efficiency, how much fuel you burn. All right, speed. Speed's got to do with the glider selection that you take. You can get really fast gliders by just, well, you get fast gliders no matter what the size is. But some guys would take a smaller glider of the manufacturer they really like, and they'd be overweight on the maximum weight of the glider, and they'd make up for that by just having a larger engine. But as soon as you do that just to gain speed, then the engine has to work harder, and eventually it's counterproductive once again because you're burning more fuel, and you're also coming in for a very fast landing. Now, when you're doing cross-country flying, you've got to consider that your skill level needs to be up to landing at any place. Very tight places, and also do very tight takeoffs. And when you start chancing it by dropping a size, selecting a size of the glider that's very small and you're overweight on it, then it's more of the acrobatic decisions that you make. Slalom flying, slalom racing, those kinds of guys make those kinds of decisions. Cross-country flying, ideally what you want, I'm going to take, for example, my selection of glider as a warp. I've selected the 20 because I've taken the minimum weight of that the manufacturer gives me, the maximum weight, and also the pro weight. That's for a pro pilot. The maximum weight of 145 kilos they give me there, and I would put myself halfway between 100 kilos and 145 kilos. I would want to be halfway in there in order to select the size 20. So if I was too heavy, if I was getting closer to the 145 mark, I would go with the Warp 22, for example. It'll give me an extra 10 kilos on the max weight. Now, why do I want to do that? Because you need a margin between your max weight and your weight and the maximum weight. And if you start getting too close to the top end, you're going to start ground rolling. The glider needs more speed in order to fly, to gain lift. And in order to get to that, it takes time. The glider rolls. You're flying in a flat line. There's a cushion of air that builds up under the glider, and when it becomes more efficient, you get more lift. And that distance is the problem. How long does that ground roll become? And it can become dangerous when you're on something like cross-country flying and you're flying at fields that have power lines or telephone lines around it, and you're not sure how you're going to be doing. I mean, these are also flying in the middle of the day, other times that you're not used to. The air density is not what you're used to. All of these things are going to impact you. So when you have the right selection glider from the beginning, or at least you're in the right weight range, you have less problems to deal with as far as ground roll comes. Okay, so you want to be at the midway, like I explained then, and still with that in mind, what kind of maximum speed is going to give you. Now, maximum speed has also got to do with how much fuel are you willing to sacrifice. So if for example, 35 knots, if I'm doing 35 knots, what kind of fuel am I burning and how much distance am I going to get at that speed? Is the glider efficient at that speed? Do I have to fly it a bit slower? Am I able to use speed bar? Can I go faster? All of these kinds of decisions you need to start learning about by actually just speaking to the manufacturer or a dealer, that's someone that has got some experience in his product, and he's going to explain to you what is the better product choices, and also what kind of speed you'll be looking at getting. And from my side, from my advice, I would say do not try and drop a size and getting to the top end of the glider. That is not the right decision to make in order to gain speed. All right, so efficiency. Again, now for example, I'm overlaying this video with footage of this morning's cross-country flight. We did a 2-hour cross-country flight that I needed to measure some numbers on a new propeller that we've got on the cross-country racing machine. I, for example, had a fuel burn of 4 liters an hour both ways. So, or at least an average over both ways. So I had to turn around a certain point, come back. So it was a 2-hour cross-country flight. And at 4 liters, I have to start calculating, all right, with 4 liters of fuel burn, and I've got 15 liters max fuel fully loaded with the reserve tank, how far is that going to get me? And will I lose a place, lose a podium position because I don't have enough range? Or is the fuel burn just if I change the setting on the glider on the trims and I'm flying a bit slower, will that increase may decrease my speed but improve my fuel efficiency? All of those numbers you got to play at, And I'm going to explain how that impacts on the chart here a little bit further on when we get to that point. All right, so efficiency, you need to calculate the numbers on your glider. So you got to go out, put the weight on, the drag, everything that you planned on after you've designed your gear. And then maybe with the help of the dealer, you've got one or two choices of glider. Then you can look at the fuel efficiency that you're getting on your specific machine. And you can then start planning what is your max range. And you can start planning your strategy for cross-country flying. Okay, so for example, this is just the overall weight here. Now weight has become a really big factor when it comes to flying. Now a lot of guys, I'm going to use myself as an example. I started off with my first Icarus a few years ago by taking the Instinct 230. That was a 33 kilo machine, empty, no fuel. And the larger engine also burns more fuel. So I ended up carrying 28 liters of fuel on a machine that weighed 33 kilos. And so my max weight was 175 kilos. That's including my body weight of 85 kilos as a pilot. The glider weight, your clothing weight, everything calculated into that. 175 kilos to carry for an 85 kilo pilot is ridiculous. And also I was 5 kilos over the maximum weight of the glider, of the max weight I was explaining a little bit earlier. So those decisions were done, or at least those numbers or planning that I did for my first Icarus was completely wrong. And because of that, I lost the place on the podium, and I got a second place. But the point is that I would have had a much better time, a much better experience if I didn't have a 3 times extended ground roll than I was used to, because overloading the glider on the Hadron XX, it just completely ground rolls into no man's land. I had wasted takeoffs a ridiculous amount. So the point is that by doing your weight calculation correctly and selecting the new technology machines, where you can get a lot of thrust out of a light payload, of a light machine, you are going to have a much better experience. So where I was 175 kilos, I redesigned my gear, redesigned the machine, and I got down to 134 kilos. That is a ridiculous amount. How can I save so much weight would be the question. It's because if you select a lighter machine that is efficiently designed, it will require less max fuel that you will have to carry. So you'll carry less fuel, where I now carry 15 liters of fuel, and my previous machine I carried 28 liters of fuel, and I'd still get the same amount of range because I'm weighing less and I selected the right glider. I'm in the right weight range of the glider. So this is where you want to get to. Something like the F-Lite weighs 20 kilos. Something like the Parajet, correct me, I believe the Parajet is something like something between 25 and 26 kilos. Might be a little bit less, maybe 24 kilos. And I believe the Air Conception, Tornado and Nitro, those machines are also really light, something like 21, 22 kilos. So they are very light machines as well. So those the new design of machines that's come about, they really are cherry when it comes to doing cross-country flying. You make up for your by not requiring that displacement, the bigger engine, by having an improved power to weight ratio and a better selection, a larger size of glider. We can even drop a size of glider. I mean, I did one Icarus on a Hadron XX22. I was overloading it completely. Went on to a Hadron XX24. So I was in the right weight range, but still way too heavy. Now, by redesigning the gear, or at least having access to redesigned gear, and also everything else that I'm carrying, the whole strategy changing, being 134 kilos suddenly, now I've dropped the size in the glider. I'm actually down to a Warp 20, funny enough. So that is why your planning is so important. Selection of the machine influences the selection of the size of the glider you're going to use, influences everything else. All right, so where was I? All right, so the weight of your machine, that is really in your total package. That is what you need to calculate, because that 134 places me more than 10 kilos under the max payload. And because of that, I have no extended ground roll. In actual fact, I have the same takeoff on my glider as I would at sea level as I have at high altitude. That is something that's unique to the Warp for me. I've not experienced that on any other glider. But because I'm in the right, I do believe that because I'm in the right weight ranges, it does influence that. So I know a lot of guys like buying those small 17, 18 size gliders, but you've got to look at the weight, and you've got to think about the fact that if I've got a small glider, do I need a bigger engine able to carry that much fuel, still get off the ground in time? Okay, design, the gear design, your payload, your navigation that needs to come into that. You need a really good radio to communicate with other aircraft and other pilots and the organizers, etc. The power bank, you need a power bank that can charge your navigation, your cell phone, or whatever you're using as a navigation, your radio as well. So the power bank needs to be big enough. You need to have water. A lot of guys would skip that part and just have a small, but like a half liter of water with them. I can tell you that if you're going to be flying 10 hours a day, up there it might be a bit cooler, but the sun is still burning the crap out of you, and water is a precious resource. You need to have a good resource of that. So getting to the gear design, having access to all of these things is really important. First Icarus I did, I lost my phone. I lost my power bank on takeoff. It's a 500 kilometer race. About halfway through, I had no idea where I was going, and I was pretty much just flying on bearing and a manual compass that I had. I flew through 3 storms, including one that saw me to the end of the day, where I just landed in a field and slept in a barnyard. The question is, do you really want to make stupid decisions like that? I know that the Icarus is about making stupid decisions so that you could have an adventure, but I can tell you that you are having just as much fun seeing a race through where nothing went wrong because your planning was a lot better. So make sure that your power banks and everything is secured and your gear is really well designed. You'll have just as good a time as well. All right, so climb rate. Getting back to that climb rate, I've made that a separate point because I want to emphasize the fact that if you are going to get to the top end of this glider, your climb rate disappears. And what happens is the guys get off the ground with a long ground roll in the beginning of the race or during stages of the race, and their climb rate is just ridiculous. They got to fly trims close because they're overweight in the glider, and mountains start and hills and mountains start appearing on the horizon, and they can't get high enough. And that's part of the training that you do in advanced courses like sport licenses, where you need to know how high above a mountain you need to cross over in order not to eat rotor. I've flown in the Icarus where I've overtaken guys a couple of thousand feet above them because my climb rate was a lot better, and I've seen these guys get hammered under me because they're flying into rotor zones and they just simply can't get higher. The glider selection was wrong. So climb rate is really important point. Now let's start talking about the numbers. When we talk about the numbers, I'm not even mentioning the names of the machines here, but there are 3 prominent machines or manufacturers in the market. When it comes to the Moster 185, the Pluma, the Parajet, Fly Products, all of them use the Moster. It's pretty much Vitarazi doing the designing on that engine to make sure that it becomes a better unit and a more efficient unit and reliable unit. I mean, for all the manufacturers, it's about being reliable, giving their customers something that'll see them through the race or through long cross-country flights. And I can promise you, right in the beginning, when I saw this sport beginning, at least these long cross-country flights beginning, 70 to 80% of the pilots bail in the race or do not finish because of unreliable engines, and that has improved quite a bit. I would say that the machines are getting a lot better. All right, so I'm going to be talking about 3 different units here. I'm getting off track here. So Parajet, I'm going to use as an example because it's got a great built-in 25-liter tank option that's been designed for them. That's part of what Parajet is doing for their customers to get them to be more of an improved product for long-range cross-country flying. So 25 liters of fuel. Why 25 liters? Also part of the rules of the Icarus, because if you have to pack more than 25 liters of fuel and guys are using bladder bags in front of them and all over them, and there's an accident on takeoff, that those bladder bags are not bulletproof and they can spill fire is a possibility, because that fuel coming over, spilling all over a hot engine can be disastrous. I know about accidents that have happened involving fuel. I've seen a pilot slip on landing in the Icarus right in front of me. The propeller almost hitting my head as he hit the ground, and the fuel bladder burst. So not a big fan of those fuel bladders. I like what Parajet has designed with the extended fuel range tank, and it's taken us more than a year to be able to do the same on the F-Lite with a different concept. It's a carbon fiber separate secondary tank. Nirvana really wanted to reduce weight by not making a larger fiberglass tank. Having a separate tank made out of carbon fiber reduces weight, but it doesn't have the same range as the 25 liter capacity that you would get on the Parajet. I mean, I'm only carrying 15 liters of fuel, but I'll get back to why we've selected it as 15 liters and not going all the way to 25. And then the other engine I'm using is for heavy pilots. They really do like selecting something like the Air Conception Tornado 280. I've seen quite a few of those machines into the races, it's an example of when you start doing displacement, a bigger engine machine is going to burn more fuel. You don't get something for nothing. If you're going to have a more powerful machine, you are going to burn more fuel. It's just simple. It's simple numbers, and the numbers that I'm writing down here is based on actual Icarus results. So heavy guys with an Air Conception Tornado, Nirvana, I'm going to just this machine over here. There's 3.75 hours. 35 knots gives me 125 miles that I'd be able to accomplish. That is on the numbers that I flew today. So the numbers that you have for leisure flying might not be the same numbers that you'll have during an Icarus race, because you're packing more weight, you're flying at different altitudes or higher altitudes. The higher you go, the less efficient your propeller might become. Depends on the propeller type that you got on your machine. That influences obviously your fuel burn. So you might get a different number. And I've seen through the Icarus that most of the time the numbers are quite substantially higher than the marketed numbers on the engine. I know that the winner of the Icarus X in South Africa last year burnt about 6.5 liters, a bit more than 6.5 liters an hour. I burnt about 4.5 liters per hour, and the Air Conception was still around 8 liters an hour, I believe. I've seen those numbers in the past, but I haven't seen the numbers for the previous race. But anyways, let's go on the numbers that I do know of in the past. Okay, so I'd be getting out of my 15 liters of fuel, I'd be doing 3.7 hours on the 15 liters, giving me at a speed of 35 knots. That is on the Dudek warp, and I've calculated these speeds or determined these speeds out of an Icarus race, and also just out of this morning's 2-hour cross-country flight back and forth in the same weather conditions. All right, so why you see that how these numbers play out differently. If you're burning 8 liters but you're only doing 33 knots, you're going to have 3.1 hours of duration that you've got. So with a reduced speed, you're only getting 100 miles. If you've got a better 25 liter capacity, you're doing 3.8 hours at 6.5 liters an hour, but you're doing less speed because of your glider selection. You are actually getting a reduced number. Sorry, that number is incorrect. This number should be 131.25. Okay, I got it correctly there. This number is written down incorrectly. So let me correct that while we are having this conversation. All right, so this one would be 131.25. Okay. All right, so it all comes down to your glider selection. Now, maybe the Moster 185 would have had better numbers distance-wise if it was flying a different glider that gave it a bit more of an efficient number over here with a better speed. You'd have a better, or at least an improved range. But this isn't the final winning result. This is just the numbers playing out. And then obviously the pilot's skill and strategy and everything else comes into play. And obviously there's a lot of rules coming into the Icarus. For example, there you take off in the afternoon, so you cannot finish the race in one day. So the pro pilots are stuck in the fact that they can fly as far as possible on day one. But altitude selection, everything else, if the one pilot selects an altitude that has a tailwind and he does better, all of those things determine the end result, not just the numbers. The numbers planning just helps you have an improved design or improved experience. So this is why we went with, at least Nirvana went with the 15 liters, is because if we based that on the partnership with Dudek, and using the Dudek warp with kind of speeds. It was previously based on the Hadron XX. What kind of speeds had pretty much the same speed, almost maybe at 33 knots. Also, I do believe that the warp is a little bit faster, but maybe that is when you've got the speed bar engaged, not as it trims open speed. So so based on that, we designed the 15-liter tank and came up with still the same results. So when you look at the chart here, you look at, here's the liters over here. So the 25 liters is going to give you how many miles it plays out, and that's with your speed calculated into it and your fuel burn. So if you're burning 6.5, for example, on the Moster 185, it puts you about here on the chart. Nirvana has got a lot less fuel, but gets an improved distance because of the speed, the glider selection, and the efficiency of the engine, the aerodynamics, everything else that comes into play with that. The power to weight ratio produces this result when it comes to just the numbers on the engine. And then if you burn the same amount of fuel, okay, now for example, an Air Conception doesn't have an extended built-in extended fuel tank. The guys that I know that have flown them, the Air Conceptions in the past, they would use whatever the baggage design they have. They would just use the fuel bladders, put it into them. And I've known guys that have put up to 50 liters of fuel. Some really great pilots. And for me, the question is, do you really need to carry more and more fuel because you want to fly a specific engine or a specific displacement? Some pilots don't have a choice because they're very big guys and they want that power to be able to compete and stay ahead of the race. So I guess all of those decisions comes into play. This graphic is about the fuel burn. Now this is specifically, I'm using my machine and the constant evolution of using different propellers, etc. So this is the how many liters I burn per hour, and this is the speeds that I fly. So you've got to do these numbers in order to determine where you sit on a chart. You've got to make your own chart. So this is 25 knots, 30 knots, 35, 40 knots, and this is the amount of liters you're going to burn at that. So when I engage speed bar at the very end, you can see this graph is plateauing because I won't get more than 40 knots out of my glider, but I'm burning 6.5 liters of fuel, and that is not an efficient rate. So I'm not going to be planning my strategy to be on speed bar at all. In actual fact, I was able to overtake pretty much everyone at the same altitudes, flying other types of gliders, other brands and manufacturers, because I was flying at a constant 35 knots and I could have an efficient burn rate of between 4 and 4.5. Now, I got a 4.5 on the previous race because I was using a 2-blade propeller, and we are working on a 3-blade and a 4-blade propeller, and this morning's result was a 4-liter burn. So okay, so you can see how the total calculation of the numbers is something that you got to plan in order to know where you sit. So your glider, your machine design is all about power to weight ratio. If you're going to select something small, you're going to see that that influences your total weight, and then that, according to that, you determine the size glider, whether it's a 22, a 24, or a 20. You can drop a size if you're using a lightweight machine. I'm going to use another example. Francois is our Nirvana racing team pilot in the South African team, and he flew Nirvana Ranger and the previous Icarus. That machine weighs around 27 kilos. He's a 100-kilogram pilot. We decided for him to buy that machine before the Airflight was designed, which is a 200cc, because the 230cc was an appropriate displacement for a heavy pilot. So he flew a larger sized glider. He had to carry more fuel, all of that. Now he dropped the Ranger, went over to the Airflight 20 kilo package, and because of that he dropped the size in his glider selection, and also he's getting off the ground a lot faster because the F-Flight 200 has more thrust than the Ranger 230 and the Instinct 230 used to have. So, well, still have. So the F-Flight is actually more efficient in the right racing specification. So yeah, take those calculations into account. I'm talking about all the manufacturers. I'm talking about whether you fly a Parajet, whether you fly an air conception. You look at the total weights, you look at your aerodynamic design, and then you select the right glider, and then you work out these numbers, because this board really is important about getting a really good result at the end of the day. All right, guys, that's it from me. I hope you enjoy some of the visuals that I've overlaid of this morning's flight, which is really fantastic, flying over clouds. Now, yeah, well, flying in cloudy conditions and whatever else, that's not necessarily something that you got to be planning on doing. But what you got to know is when you're doing cross-country flying in a race, there's storms coming and going. There's so much weather between you and the end of a 1,000-mile flight that you are going to fly, but you're going to face a lot of different weather conditions, and becoming more comfortable in your in that kind of scenario really is determined by the equipment that you use. If it's reliable equipment, you're going to feel comfortable flying in anything. So that's it from me. If you guys got any questions, put out the points, mail me. I'll be happy to answer your questions. All right, guys. Cheers.